This video is based on ancient mythology and does not present historical facts. It focuses on the interpretation of mythic tradition and symbolism. What does a hero actually look like? Most people imagine someone fearless, always victorious, impossibly perfect. But Hercules, the greatest hero in all of Greek mythology, was none of those things. He made mistakes. He broke. And it was from those broken pieces that the 12 labors began. When we talk about Hercules, we always focus on his strength. But personally, I think that's missing the point entirely. The more interesting question is, why did he have to do any of this in the first place? And what did it actually do to him? Hercules, known in Greek myth as Heracles, was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Alcmene, half god, half human, powerful beyond measure, and yet never fully belonging to either world. That tension defined everything about his life. The goddess Hera hated him from the moment he was born. And honestly, the reason isn't hard to understand. He was living proof of her husband's betrayal. Her rage wasn't just jealousy. It was a wound, and that wound became action. Hera's hatred followed Hercules like a shadow across his entire life. To me, it's easy to cast Hera as the villain here, but her anger has its own logic. The fury of someone who was wronged. That kind of feeling doesn't only belong to mythology. That hatred reached its darkest point in the event that started everything. Hera drove Hercules to madness, and in that state, he lost his wife and children. When the madness lifted and he understood what had happened, he was shattered. He traveled to the oracle at Delphi, desperate for some kind of answer, some way forward. The oracle's answer was blunt. Serve King Eurystheus. Complete whatever 12 tasks he assigns you. For a man of Hercules' power, this was humiliation. A demigod, forced to kneel before a mortal king. But he didn't run. And that, more than anything, is why I think Hercules deserves to be called a hero. Not because of his strength, but because he didn't look away from what he had done. The first labor. The Nemean Lion. This creature had skin that no weapon could pierce. Arrows bounced off. Swords were useless. Hercules killed it with his bare hands, then stripped its hide and wore it as armor. On the surface, it's a story about raw power. But look a little deeper, and it's about finding a way through when every normal option has failed. We've all hit walls like that. The question is whether we stop or keep looking for the way through. The second labor. The Lernaean Hydra. Cut off one head, and 2 grow back in its place. This is a monster that gets worse the more you fight it head on. Hercules couldn't beat it alone. He called on his nephew, Aeolus, and together, they found a solution. Burn each wound shut before the heads could return. What I find striking about this labor isn't the monster, it's the lesson. Sometimes the harder you fight something the wrong way, the worse it gets. And asking for help isn't weakness, it's strategy. The Hydra feels like a perfect symbol for the kind of problems in life that multiply when you approach them the wrong way. The third labor, capturing the golden hind of Cerynea. This deer was sacred to the goddess Artemis, which meant killing it was out of the question. Hercules tracked it for over a year before he could catch it without causing harm. He returned it to Artemis after showing it to Eurystheus. This labor isn't about strength or combat at all. It's about patience, about knowing when to push and when to simply follow for as long as it takes. Some goals can't be forced. They have to be earned through persistence. The fourth labor. The Erymanthian Boar. During this task, things took a painful turn. A conflict broke out with a group of centaurs, and in the chaos, Hercules accidentally wounded Chiron, his own beloved teacher, one of the wisest beings in Greek mythology. Chiron's wound would not heal, and his story came to a sorrowful end. For Hercules, this was the most personal loss of all the labors. To lose the person you respected most, and to know your own hand caused it. That's a weight no victory can erase. The fifth labor, cleaning the Augean stables in a single day. King Augean owned thousands of cattle. His stables hadn't been cleaned in decades. Eurystheus almost certainly assigned this labor to humiliate Hercules, to make a legendary warrior scrub filth. Instead, Hercules redirected 2 rivers to flow through the stables and cleared everything in hours. This one might be my favorite. It's not about fighting at all. It's about thinking differently, about refusing to be defined by how a problem is supposed to be solved. And there's something quietly powerful about a hero who can handle the unglamorous work without losing his dignity. The 6th labor, driving away the Stymphalian birds. These creatures had metal feathers. They could launch like arrows and were terrorizing an entire region. Athena gave Hercules a bronze rattle to startle them into the sky, where he could bring them down with his bow. What I notice here is that Athena stepped in to help, the goddess of wisdom, offering the right tool at the right moment. That detail matters. This story isn't about a lone hero doing everything himself. Real strength, in Greek mythology and in life, often comes from the right relationship at the right time. The 7th labor, capturing the Cretan bull. This bull had once been a sacred gift from Poseidon to King Minos of Crete. But when Minos broke his promise, Poseidon turned the animal wild and destructive. Hercules subdued it and brought it to Eurystheus. But here's the detail I find fascinating. Eurystheus tried to dedicate the bull to Hera as an offering. Hera refused. She didn't want Hercules getting any credit, even indirectly. No matter what he accomplished, her approval was never going to come. That dynamic feels uncomfortably familiar. Most of us know what it's like to work hard for someone whose recognition we will never receive. The 8th labor, the mares of Diomedes. Diomedes was a king who fed his horses on human flesh. Hercules put an end to that cruelty. And in a grim twist of poetic justice, Diomedes met the same fate as his victims. The myth doesn't shy away from the symbolism here. Those who build systems of cruelty tend to be consumed by them in the end. The 9th labor, the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This one stands apart from the others. According to the myth, Hippolyta was actually willing to give Hercules the belt peacefully. She had no quarrel with him. Then Hera intervened, stirring up mistrust and turning the encounter into a battle. The question this labor leaves me with is a simple one. What if Hera hadn't interfered? Could this have been resolved without any violence at all? Just 2 people talking, reaching an agreement? Even in mythology, the path to peace gets sabotaged. Maybe that's the most honest thing these stories have to say about human conflict. The 10th labor, the cattle of Geryon. Geryon was a 3-bodied giant living at the far edge of the known world. To reach him, Hercules had to travel to the very limits of the earth. Along the way, he reportedly set up 2 massive pillars at the strait we now call Gibraltar, marking the boundary between the known world and the unknown. This labor is about more than a fight with a giant. It's about going beyond the edge of the map, stepping into territory that everyone else has agreed is too far. In a very real sense, it's a story about redefining what's possible. The 11th labor, the golden apples of the Hesperides. These apples grew in a garden at the end of the world, guarded by a sleepless serpent. To get them, Hercules made a deal with the Titan, Atlas, the one condemned to hold up the sky for eternity. Hercules offered to carry the sky while Atlas fetched the apples. Atlas returned with them, but then suggested he'd deliver them personally because he had no intention of picking up that burden again. Hercules agreed, then asked Atlas to hold the sky, just for a moment, while he adjusted his shoulders. Atlas took it back. Hercules picked up the apples and walked away. There's a quiet humor to this moment that I love. The strongest man in the world didn't use brute force to win this one. He used common sense and a bit of wit. That's what makes Hercules more than just a symbol of power. The 12th labor, descending into the underworld to bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed guardian of the dead. This was Eurystheus's final task, and almost certainly designed with the hope that Hercules would never return. The underworld was not a place the living were meant to leave. But Hercules went down anyway. He stood before Hades himself, asked permission, and subdued Cerberus with his bare hands, no weapons. He brought the creature to the surface, showed it to Eurystheus, and then returned it to the underworld. To me, this final labor carries the deepest symbolism of all 12, going down into the land of the dead and coming back. It's not just about physical courage. It's about descending into your own darkest place, your fear, your grief, your guilt, and walking back out without losing yourself. When the 12 labors were complete, Hercules had done everything the oracle demanded. But did they bring him peace? The myths tell us his life didn't suddenly become easy after that. He kept being tested. He kept making mistakes. He kept suffering. So what exactly were the 12 labors for? From one angle, this is a story about atonement and rebuilding. Hercules began the labors because of something he could not undo. But the tasks themselves weren't just punishment. They were transformation. Every labor taught him something different. A different kind of problem. A different kind of solution. A different kind of loss. By the end, he wasn't just stronger. He understood himself in a way he couldn't have before. From another angle, this is a story about power and the individual. Eurystheus designed several of these labors to break Hercules, or at least to humiliate him. But Hercules kept finding ways to succeed that no one had anticipated. He didn't destroy the system. He moved through it on his own terms. That still resonates today. Most of us, at some point, find ourselves stuck inside structures that weren't built in our favor. The question is whether we find our own way through anyway. I don't think one of these readings is more correct than the other. What makes this myth so enduring? What keeps it alive after thousands of years? In films, and books, and games, and conversations, is exactly that it holds both truths at once. The most human thing about Hercules is not his strength. It's that he kept going after everything fell apart. Mythology often presents heroes as fully formed, arriving complete. Hercules isn't like that. He carried the weight of his worst moment into every single one of those 12 challenges, and the work of facing them imperfectly, painfully, and sometimes with a little help, is what made him who he was. Not perfection, movement, choice, persistence. According to the myths, Hercules was eventually welcomed into Olympus itself, a demigod who earned a place among the gods. But if I'm being honest, that ending matters less to me than the journey. Not the destination, but the decisions that made the destination possible. And maybe that's the most honest message this story has for us today. Whatever you've done, whatever you're carrying, the 12 labors aren't finished yet. The work isn't meant to be easy. Some of it will feel impossible. Some of it will feel beneath you. Some of it will cost you more than you expected. But you might complete it in a way no one saw coming. And that changes everything. Hercules is one of the most enduring figures in all of Greek mythology. The reason this story keeps getting retold, across centuries, across cultures, across every format imaginable, isn't because he was the strongest. It's because his story is, at its core, about what it means to be human, to fail, to face it, to keep going anyway.